Research Council, which is the most important leading, let's say, European institution for funding basic research, basic fundamental research, has also a specific call, which is called proof of concept. Well, you can apply only if you have an ERC, starting grant or advanced grant. This is just, for instance, my case. I applied for that. It's pretty interesting because it's just to basically bridge the gap between your fundamental research and finally something that can be, let's say, placed in the market. And so basically the type of high-risk, high-gain research at the frontiers of knowledge that the European Research Council promotes can generate unexpected or new opportunities for commercial and societal applications. And so the ERC, for instance, is committed to ensure the full exploitation of the excellent ideas that are funded by the European Research Council. And so basically the proof of concept has the, let's say, the idea to bridge the gap between the research and the early stage of a marketable innovation. It is not yet enough to create really a company, but it's the first step. Then, what are the steps in general in the creation of a spin-off? Well, this is just a simple list. Well, they should not be exactly in this order, could also be in different order, but let's say, first of all, you develop a proof of concept that you can use to demonstrate that the invented method is useful in a particular application. Then usually you develop a prototype of the product, and this can be used also to learn about how to produce, how to sell, and so on. Later on, you develop a successful business model for the spin-off in order to understand how to create, deliver, and capture value in the years. So you see it's quite multidisciplinary by definition. You need expertise, technical expertise, but you need also some know-how related to let's say, the business model, and so something related to economics, typically. Finally, attract startup funding to finance the development of prototypes and new products, and then you can acquire financial resources from venture capital firms, banks, and so on, and so forth. And finally, acquiring the first customers. So you have all these stages involved, and of course, if the national regulations can help you to alleviate some duties, could be taxes or could help you in further development, they are of course very welcome. Then let's look at the statistics in Italy. I had a look at this from this website, spinoffricerca.it. I got some data there. Well, you can have an Excel file, all the data of the Italian spin-off companies. Then I worked a bit on them in order to have, let's say, the number of new spin-offs every couple of years. I group it in this way just for simplicity. You see that it's pretty interesting. These are just spin-offs, university spin-offs, so from coming from the industry, from the university academic environment. And you see there is a nice change of trend. Up to 2000, more or less, there was nothing, almost nothing. Then there's a significant increase now in the number of spin-offs. 250 in this, let's say, biennial here, quite a lot. In 2014, I think the data probably are not complete, or in any case, it was a crisis effect. But then there is a nice also, I would say, report by Scuola Superiore Sant'Anna, where you can see also the geographical, by Picaluga and Balderi in 2006, well, related to the geographical distribution also in Italy. Well, Emilia-Romagna, Toscana, Piemonte, and Lombardia are really in a good position, if you look at that. But then, just to know, because anyway, also for me it was a curiosity, I had a look at the statistics, for instance, of the Eidgenössische Technische Hochschule Zurich. And if you look at the ETH, you find this nice data from the 1998 and 2008 database. Well, they have about 20 spin-off per year, which is quite a lot, in many different areas. So information technology, material science, biotech, of course, something really high-tech, cutting-edge technology, which is pretty interesting and means that, well, basically, especially I would say the technological research can really lead to new let's say, spin-off and this kind of technology transfer activities. Then also in that report, they comment on the funding gap. And I think this will be interesting now, really from Mattia Corbetta, know more how to maybe help in bridging this funding gap, because you start with an early stage startup, you need some money to do that, and then to go to the early or expansion of your company, then you need additional money. This is not that easy. There are different ways to acquire that. Could be venture capitals or banks, investors interested in your research, in your products, but also local laws, of course, of your nation, of your country. Here we speak about Italian laws, can help, of course, in alleviating this dramatic step, which is essential because can provide you can be, let's say, you can die, your company could have no future or could continue working. What is very interesting, however, now I speak mainly about industrial spin-offs, industrial spin-off versus university spin-offs, is that university spin-offs usually have a higher probability to survive. So the survival rate is usually better. This is just an example of ETH Zurich. They compare their survival rate versus other, let's say, survival rate of other companies in Switzerland or in general in Canton Zurich. And you see there's a big gap. So usually, thanks to the fact that you have a better way to protect your intellectual property through patents, and you can also have, let's say, really high technology research, then you are in a better position on the market to allow your spin-off to survive. And so this is an advantage we should actually exploit even more in the future. And with this, basically, I conclude my talk, my short talk, just to introduce basically this important concept. Spin-off companies from the academia can be extremely also powerful. In MIT Lucca, we have one from Roberto Bemporad, for instance. Well, he's quite successful. So it means that really, basically, putting good knowledge and, let's say, a lot of, let's say, high tech could help a lot in having a good also survival possibility. However, we need to push more in this direction. And also, I would say the Italian laws, if they improve in a certain direction, can help us in, in moving towards technology transfer and spin-off companies as well. Thank you very much. Now I leave the floor to Eugenio Telleschi. He's innovation advisor in Euro in Advisory, and he will speak about the challenges of open innovation for enterprises.
Right. Well, nowadays in Italy, the issue about innovation and how to foster investments in R&D has become crucial. To meet up the challenges of competition, investments in R&D have to rise dramatically over the next few years. Well, traditionally speaking, enterprises were not used to deal with innovation in a proper way. Let's say that there's been a lot of reasons to explain that, reasons and responsibilities. I've tried very briefly to focus on three categories: enterprises, researchers, and policymakers, in order to try to explain why historically speaking, this kind of investments were so low. Enterprises. In our domestic economic system, the great majority of enterprises are small and medium enterprises, and the greatest part of them is a family-run enterprise. That has meant that they have been unwilling or unable to cope with innovation-related matters, and they have preferred to rely more on creativity and flexibility rather than on planning ahead and setting up structural links with the research sector. On the other side, researchers. Well, at academic level, we may say that, traditionally speaking, fundamental research has received more attention than applied research and experimental development. This state of art is changing, and I may say that this is also thanks to the role played by the European funded programs. For instance, if you think about Horizons 2020, they pour 80 billions of euros up until 2020 for applied research and experimental development solutions. Finally, coming to the policymakers, we may say that if we look back over to the last 10 years, they have dedicated their efforts more to a sort of a simple lawmaking exercise rather than setting up a very comprehensive and organic, coherent policy for supporting innovation and investments. So this has to change. This is changing, and we may say that there is a new awareness of the importance of innovation amongst entrepreneurs and researchers. This is why maybe we are here. There is a new willingness to cooperate together, or at least to work out new ways for setting up structured forms of permanent collaboration. While Mattia Corbetta will show us the Italian Startup Act, how the Italian Startup Act works and what opportunities do stem from it for researchers and entrepreneurs, we may shed light on open innovation issue, since this is the pattern that it is increasingly used to understand how the innovation process works. Yet open innovation risks to be an overused term, in particular because of its implementation difficulties. Making this model works represents a challenge for anyone who is dealing with this issue. And this is why, to achieve this objective, we are trying to give our professional contribute, and this idea is at the center of our company project. In particular, we focus on the relationships between researchers and enterprises. So, what is the meaning of open innovation? Usually speaking, this idea traces back to Professor Chesbrough, and this is the definition that is usually used. Let's say that the core idea of open innovation is that dropping the traditional approach to innovation, which was considering innovation just inside the enterprise, moving towards a new model to approach innovation, because to make innovation process effective, solutions have to be looked for outside companies. So following this approach and following a practical perspective, we may say that on the one hand, there are a lot of innovative ideas and solutions that firms don't know. But according also to our experience, they don't know how to search for and where to look for these ideas as solutions. On the other hand, researchers quite often wonder how their innovative ideas and solutions can be made available to enterprises. So here there is the crucial point that I would like to stress today, which is, to put in another way what I've been talking about, is that open innovation model emphasizes the importance of selective network and selective networking skills, provided that these two worlds, these two sectors, the research one and enterprises one, have to collaborate concretely. But what does it mean, selective network? Under an operational perspective, it means to put this to work together, fostering the real collaboration in order to achieve applied research solutions in terms of new products, new processes, and new services. Furthermore, it means helping these players to strike a balance among their different procedures, plans, mindset, backgrounds. To put it in another way, it does represent a new operational area of activities that can be identified, and of course, that it has to be professionally covered. In a sense, we may say that the building of this selective network may be considered as a discovery process. What are the challenges under an operational point approach, the challenges of open innovation for enterprises and researchers? I've tried to shed light on just 6 main challenges. Challenges that have to be met if we want the open innovation model work effectively. First of all, setting up and structuring direct contacts and the troubleshooting dialogue between entrepreneurs and researchers, providing customized solutions, improving the governance of the innovation process, searching for specific grants to promote investments, finding investors to receive financial support for innovative ideas or projects, and keeping up to date on the evolution of domestic and European regulation for open innovation activities. So, unfortunately, according to our 10 years experience dealing with large and small and medium enterprises, the bulk of enterprises we have had the opportunity to work for, honestly, too often are not able, basically are unable to lead the innovation process and to cope with these challenges. This has paved the way for a new operative approach to open innovation that is aimed to try to reduce, to bridge the relationships gap between the research sector and the enterprise sector. That means a new professional figure which acts to reduce this gap is at the center of this relationship. First of all, he or she has to work in outsourcing to ensure to garrison the innovation process. How? By acting on a double layer. At company's level, he or she has to listen to the firm's demands, the demands that the firm is supposed to know, and moreover, to help it to detect its hidden needs. At the same time, on the other layer, the research layer, he or she has to encourage the innovation process thanks to its consistent dialogue with researchers. So there is a great need of such a professional figure, especially in Italy. Actually, we believe that it is important to share experiences from other countries, and this is why I'm glad to be connected with our colleagues and partners in Oslo, Copenhagen, and Istanbul. So I said in outsourcing, well, I wanted to put forward a few reasons why outsourcing is important for this kind of professional role. First of all, this professional figure can help to detect hidden problems more easily, moving from the outside rather than from inside the company. He or she does know where to search for solution. Endowing also firms with a sort of outside-the-box culture. Furthermore, this professional figure is able to bring a new selective network that complements the company's one, and can also draw on similar case history to provide customized solutions. So I've tried to put it briefly. So reliable outsourcing role. Reliable, do consider that this figure doesn't belong to neither the research sector or the enterprise sector, but he or she knows quite well these two words. Secondly, broaden and customized network, multidisciplinary approach, helping enterprises to think outside the box and trying to enhance the governance of open innovation. So finally, we may say that researchers and entrepreneurs, I would stress, who are eager to innovate, can enjoy great opportunity from the open innovation model. And setting up innovative startups represent the best way for exploiting such opportunities. This is why, from our point of view, Euro in Advisory, the legislative framework on innovative startups is so bloody important. It's my pleasure to give the floor to Mattia. Thank you.
I can start from here, then I'll go there and come back here.
Okay, this is my plan.
Do we have a commander?
No, but I can move here. Say.
No, because I'm a shy guy, so I don't like to stand there.
No, you have.
Okay. So,
let me.
yeah, because I would like to make some introductory remarks, so I don't need the slides. Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for the hospitality, for inviting me here. It's a pleasure, it's an honor, and I'm really hopeful that my intervention here can give a contribution to making clear what the Italian government is doing so as to create a friendlier regulatory framework to help high-tech companies. Let's agree on some methodological points. First of all, I would like to know to whom I'm talking to. So please, those who come from extra-EU countries, raise your hands, please. Okay. Where do you come from, if I might ask? Where do you come from? Ukraine? Don't be shy, please. India. Ukraine. Sorry? States? Canada? Sorry? Okay, Russian Federation? Same? India? Okay, some other people that are foreigners but come from Europe? Yes. Okay. Don't raise your hands twice, please. Okay. Where do you come from in Europe? Romania. Okay, mulțumesc. What about you? Herzlich willkommen, mein Herr. Anybody else not coming from Italy? Great. All the others are Italians, I might guess. Okay, great. Second point, I will start without slides, then I'll move there and use them. Because basically today I would like to, I can use this too. Okay, so I don't need to stand up, it's better. Because I would like to deal with 5 points today. First of all, why supporting startups is important. Secondly, I would like to foster a reflection on what startups actually are. Thirdly, I would like to present the Italian regulatory framework for startups. Fourthly, I will tell you about some more recent developings on some other policies that regard not specifically newly established companies, that is startups, but SMEs that still have some features regarding technological innovation, but are more mature. We call them innovative SMEs according to our law. And fifth point is going to concern some other related companies always dealing with R&D and innovation. So first of all, why supporting startups is important. Maybe I could take this for granted while I'm talking to you, but I still think that it might be the case to handle this issue. There's a nice book that was published a couple of years ago by an Italian professor that is teaching at Berkeley University, Moretti, The New Geography of Jobs. He shows and provides evidence of the fact that while traditional industries had a multiplier in job creation by 1,6, that is, for each new post in a traditional industry, 1,6 posts were created in related sectors. Okay, this multiplier is threefold higher in innovative industries. So for each new post in a high-tech startup, you're gonna have 5 new posts in related sectors. So the multiplier is threefold higher. You know how we desperately need leverages to foster job creation processes and growth here in this country. We are frank and honest people, so we shall not hide the fact that we have had low GDP growth in the last few years, maybe in the last decade. We have, does anybody know how high the unemployment rate is in Italy? 12%, yes, a little bit more, I think. 12 comma something, but yes, it's correct. And youth unemployment? Yes, these are the last figures. Don't escalate. Okay, so we really need good policies that can contribute growth, to job creation, and to economic development. So 3 years ago, a few guys that were working at the Ministry of Economic Development thought that apart from the national emergency that was under the media's light, I'm referring to the financial crisis that was affecting our country, that there was another emergency that was more hidden but needed to be tackled as soon as possible. That is the lack of a national, bright, needed strategy on how to support high-tech companies. And this is basically what we did. We started from scratch and built a new architecture that is applicable to high-tech companies. So supporting startups, and in particular supporting high-tech startups, is important not only to foster job creation dynamics, but also to, as you said, to bridge the gap between the academia and the entrepreneurial fabric, because we have this kind of problem here in this country. They are two separate worlds that tend, unfortunately, not to communicate one with the other. It's important to foster social mobility so that entrepreneurs are not just people that are children of former entrepreneurs, but are people that are, for example, studying something during a PhD or a master's and would otherwise have not thought about themselves as future entrepreneurs, but they must be stimulated and encouraged to think about their own professional future in the labor market as entrepreneurs. So this is a kind of cultural switch that we would like to favor through our action. Social mobility, bridging the gap between the academia and corporates, fostering job creation, also rebranding the country. Some other countries have managed to rebrand themselves by supporting high-tech companies. Think about, for example, Chile in South America. They launched a policy aimed at attracting talent from abroad. It's called Startup Chile and the Startup Visa Initiative that was launched a few years ago. And they really managed to rebrand themselves, relaunch their image at an international level. Why could not Italy do the same? So yes, these are the main objectives that we would like to reach through our action. And this was the first point. The second point is a little reflection on what startups are. Maybe most of you speak Italian, but maybe some others might not know that the word startup does not belong to our vocabulary. It's an English word. And so I always found very interesting to think why we needed to use this word instead of the actual Italian translation of the term, that is new innovative company, nuova impresa innovativa. What is the difference between a nuova impresa innovativa and a startup? I think this lexical choice is justified, it's legitimated by the fact that startups, as we mean them at an international level, really embody, enshrine some characteristics that are genetically belonging to this phenomenon and distinguish them from traditional companies as we used to know them. What are these features? First feature, they really have an ambition to scale up quickly. They are not happy with the comfort zone. They want to scale up quickly, have really tough figures, growing quickly. Secondly, they aspire to go international. They're not happy with a local market, with a domestic market, with a regional one. Thirdly, they are often stemming from an aggregation process of people having different either academic or professional backgrounds. So you will see scientists that team up with engineers or I don't know, linguists, and decide to team up so as to pursue a common goal, that is setting up a new high-tech company. This is very interesting too, in my opinion. Fourthly, they have a clear focus on technological innovation. So they're not happy with a traditional product or service, but they really aspire to launch something new. And fifthly, they often stem from a very clear and structured process. So usually day number one for a startup is the drafting of a business plan. But then the business plan is subject to continuous retargeting according to the feedback that comes from either investors or the market. So it's a continuous process of planning, of organizing. And what I find very interesting as an Italian citizen is that these same features are something that should be willed for the whole country as a country itself. That is, imagine, I'm talking specifically to the Italians that are sitting here today. Imagine a country that is ambitious, that is more keen and inclined to go international and to be conscious and aware of its position at an international level, and is more attentive and careful about what is happening abroad. Imagine a country where talents can team up, are able to team up, they intend to team up to pursue common goals. Imagine a country that is more innovative and where decisions are taken in a more organized and planned and structured way, and they are not an adventure. This is something that is unfortunately somehow missing in Italy, and this is something that should be really encouraged, in my opinion. And so this is why I think that metaphorically startups are something that are containing some contents that go beyond just the exclusive domain of finance and economics, but really embrace a broader meaning. Method, please, if you have any kind of question, remark, doubt, insult, do not hesitate to raise your hand and tell me. Don't be shy, please, really. Okay, so let's come to the sad reality and talk about what the Italian government has done in the last 3 years to support this kind of phenomenon. The first thing we needed to do was to transform this very narrative, descriptive definition of startup I've just provided into a law, into a concept that could be turned into an actual piece of a law. So how did we define startups according to the Italian startup strategy? First slide. This one. Here. Here. Great. So when we talk about, so now I'm going to provide you the definition of innovative startup according to our startup law. And this is the kind of company that benefits from the advantages I'm going to tell you about further. So we're talking about, no, it's perfect. We're talking about limited companies. So this stuff is applicable just to limited companies. In Italian, società a responsabilità limitata, be they normal LTDs or simplified LTDs or cooperatives that are either new or established from less than 16 months. They must either reside in Italy or in another EU country, but in the latter case with at least a branch in Italy. Their turnover must not exceed 5 million euro. I mean, it can do that, of course, but if this occurs, they won't be innovative startups anymore and they won't benefit from the advantages we are gonna discuss about. They do not distribute profits, and they are not listed either on a regulated or on an unregulated market, and their core business consists of innovative goods or products or services that have a high technological value. So we're not talking about any new business, we're talking about new businesses that deal with technological innovation, be it in the agricultural sector or in manufacturing, industry, commerce, whatever it is, just they need to pertain to technological innovation. How can we see if, which one? This one? How can we see if they really belong to the domain of technological innovation? They are innovative startups, or better, they can self-certify that they are innovative startups just if they meet at least one of the three following requirements. At least one. No, not the three of them are required, just one. First of all, either 15% of the overall annual costs are attributable to R&D expenditures, or 2/3 of the team are master's degree holders, or 1/3 of the team is made up of people holding a PhD or PhD students or researchers, or they are either licensees or owners of patents or registered softwares. Okay? These are the requirements. What happens if you establish you incorporate a new company and you think you possess these requirements? You can, first of all, establish your company through a new method that is going to be launched in the next few weeks. Basically, no, this is the wrong slide, sorry. Should have told me. I saw some lost faces. Okay, so you can incorporate your company online and for free. You're going to have a standard statute that you can sign through a digital signature, and this implies that you won't need to go to a notary, as it usually occurs, to set up your new startup, but you can establish it online for free, without any kind of cost. Secondly, usually limited companies are subject to some fees. They are called diritti di segreteria or imposte di bollo here in Italian. In English they might be translatable as duty stamps or some other fees related to the chambers of commerce. So basically, anytime you either register a software or a patent, or you set up, you create a new branch for your company, or you have a new partner joining your company, you need to pay these fees or stamps. And innovative startups are totally exempted from these costs. We're not talking about huge costs. They amount to averagely 50 or 100 euros. The problem is that the total amount of these costs can be really frustrating and limiting for a newly established company that needs to devote its resources to R&D activities and not to intermediaries like the chambers of commerce. So this was about cutting red tape. Red tape is a typical problem of doing business in Italy, and we think that by establishing this new method for incorporating companies and by exempting them from these fees and these duty stamps, we helped solve this problem. Secondly, we created corporate management tools that are friendlier for this kind of companies. For example, you have the chance to create voting quotes that are not proportional to the amount of capital you bring inside the company. So creatives can contribute to decisional processes in a more than proportional way than the amount of money they bring into the company. This was just an example. There are some other things that are really technical, and I won't elaborate too much on that, but let me just stress the last point, fail-fast mechanism. You must know that Italy is a country where we tend to stigmatize those who fail as failed people. I mean, it may be that your entrepreneurial adventure didn't go as you wanted, and in this case you must be given a chance to gain and draw the experience you have gained throughout your previous experience, and not be stigmatized as a failed person and be burdened by either reputational or financial costs. And this is what is actually happening for startups. They are basically exempted from the standard failure law applicable to LTDs, and this is something we call fail-fast mechanism. So this was about some cuts in red tape and the corporate management tools. Let's go ahead and talk about the labor law. The labor law applicable to startups is really tailor-made and cut according to the needs that these companies have. We're talking about high-risk companies that tend to have very high average levels of risk and of failure. So we needed to create a flexible labor law discipline. So this is the reason why startups can hire workers through fixed-term contracts for the overall length of the startup status. They can split the salary into two parts. One is fixed and one can be dynamic, variable, and it's gonna depend on the overall performance of the company. So the better the startup performs, the more money the worker is gonna get. In particular, point number 3, either both workers and external consultants can be remunerated through equity. So stock options, work for equity schemes, and these tools are not subject to the taxes usually linked to the incomes. So they're basically tax-free. The only tax you're gonna pay on these tools is related to the capital gain. Let's go further. Sorry. Incentives for funding and investment. This is the sexiest and most delicate part of the whole story. You might have heard of an expression that sounds like credit crunch. Italy is not excluded from this phenomenon. We have really faced huge problems in the last few years regarding access to credit for companies. And this is point number 3. We set up a new method for letting startups accede to a public guarantee on bank loans. So this is a public fund. It's called Fondo di Garanzia per le Piccole e Medie Imprese, so public guarantee fund for SMEs. It usually works not for free, and a further due diligence is due further to that made by the banks. So let's make it easier. You knock at the bank's door. You're gonna apply for funding by, let's say, 100,000 euros. Your argument is going to be that 80% of this sum is guaranteed by a public fund, and this guarantee is provided, first of all, for free. Secondly, it's provided without further checks than those made by the banks itself. So if the bank checks your business plan and attests that your business plan is fundable, there won't be any other check by the public guarantee fund. This is performing very well. Point number 1 is crucial to the overall architecture built to help innovative startups. It concerns robust incentives for investment in the capital of high-tech startups. Both single individuals, so business angels as they call them, and companies, corporates, or VC firms can benefit from incentives that can climb up to 27% for investment in the capital of high-tech startups. This is meant to encourage the expansion of the VC market that, frankly speaking, is still quite little and poor in this country. In addition to this, point number 2, in July 2013, we were the first country in the world to set up specific regulations on equity crowdfunding. Equity crowdfunding, as you might know, allows you to raise capital in exchange for shares by publishing online your business model. So you're gonna take an advantage from the diffusive reach of the net by potentially attracting many investors and persuade them to bet their money on your company, with the hope that the total sum of the investment they decide to devote to your company can consist of a huge flow of cash within your company. Okay. I will now move to the Italia Startup Visa program that is particularly interesting for those who come from extra-EU countries. But before that, please let me breathe a little bit and make some questions. Help me. Questions on what we have talked so far? Yes.
Well, based on these new regulations, have you seen an improvement than looking at?
I'm gonna talk about that later. I'm gonna provide you all the stats concerning the program, all the results. If you want, I can do that now. Yes, let's do that. So here we have some figures. These figures were updated at the end of May. But what you must know, and this is extremely interesting in my opinion, is that we have a public register for high-tech startups. You can find it here, startup.registroimprese.it. I think the internet website is somewhere else in the slides. I will show it to you later. And I really hope that after this conference we can share some materials concerning the stuff we're talking about. So we have this online register that is really interesting because first of all, it's accessible online for free, and in how to say, in a modifiable format, so Excel, CSV. So whoever wants to know what the data are and wants to make some elaborations and some stats on them is free to do them. Is free to do it first. Secondly, these data are open for free and they are updated on a weekly basis. So you can monitor the progress of the law on a weekly basis. And what kind of data can you have on the registered startups? All the data one could wish to have. So where they are located, what their internet website is, when they were incorporated, when they self-certified the status of innovative startup, what kind of business they deal with, so what sector, what kind of technology they develop, how many employees they have, and how much turnover they have produced in the last year. So really, you can know everything. It's in a very transparent way and open way about these companies that are benefiting from this public policy. So the results so far say that we have more than 4,000 startups creating in the last... This whole story began in December 2012. If you want to have the legal details, the decree that launched the policy is the decree number 179 of the 18th of December 2012. The public register was launched in February 2013, and so it's now older than 2.5 years, more or less. More than 4,000 companies were created, of which more than 600 were created in 2015. They grow averagely by 40 a week, and they employ, I mean, the last time we took the data concerning both the partners and the employees was the 31st of March, and we had about 18,000 people engaged in this phenomenon, among which 15,000 are partners, shareholders, and 3,000 are employees. So most of the people engaged in the startup phenomenon now in Italy are shareholders, partners of the company. But I think that since they grew by 3,000 in the first quarter of 2015, now we might have reached 20,000 at least, 20,000 people involved. Their turnover grew by 15 or 16% in the first quarter of 2015. So this is a little bit about the dimension of the startup phenomenon in Italy. Let's talk about, you asked me about the figures of the program. Let's go farther. Let's talk about the instruments, the impact that each instrument had on the startup scene so far. For example, let's be frank, equity crowdfunding is working shit. It's really not working. There we might debate on why and how this is not happening. I think the main problem is that there's a cultural gap that impedes, that prevents many potential investors to conceive high-risk companies as a potential target for investment. This is really a pity, because we've been the first ones to regulate the phenomenon at an international level. Now Germany is following, Spain, France have set up regulations in the last few weeks. But unfortunately, it's not really providing encouraging figures. What is really performing very well is the access to the public guarantee fund I told you about. So I don't know if, yes, we have the figures there. So you can see them. We have 172 million that were lent to about 388 startups. You can see a mismatching between the number of loans and the number of startups, because some startups got more than one loan. The average amount of the loan is by 327,000 euros, which is much if you consider that we're talking about high-risk companies. So this is working very well. equity crowdfunding is not working very well. The incentives for early stage and seed stage investment are starting to perform very well this year. We've had many investments in high-tech startups, and I really think that next year, when elaborating on the data that we have gained this year, we're gonna celebrate and get drunk. This is, oh yes, please. Yes. So let's say that only 10% of the, first of all, not all the startups are interested in having credit. Okay? So consider that as a forward, let's say. So not everybody likes having debts. Consider also that usually startups prefer to have capital investment instead of debt, because when a VC or a business angel invests in a startup, he or she brings not only capital, but also network and some other kind of skills. So we're talking about high-risk companies that really have a hard life when they need to get credit, and the fact that 10% benefited from this tool is already much, believe me. Another part of the answer is that maybe some other startups got some loans from banks without benefiting from the public guarantee fund. This might be the case too. So this does not mean that only 10% of the whole of all startups had credit and that's it. Some others can have had some other forms of loans from banks. Some others maybe did not desire to be funded by banks. Yes?
Thank you. And also maybe sometimes banks, they don't exactly know what all
this is a problem we're facing too. So there's a sort of lack of knowledge by the banks themselves of this tool. But what I suggest startuppers to do in this case is to go to the bank, take out the papers and show them to the bank, and believe me, it worked.
Yeah, I remember that Roberto was waiving the decree 120.
And it worked.
Yeah,
and it's one of the best satisfactions and gratifications I had in my entire life when the guy called me and told me, yes, it worked, and I got 200,000 euros from a bank. So this is the answer. So what other kinds of fundings can they have had in the last couple of years? Maybe some regional forms of funding. There are lots of regions, territories that are setting up funding schemes for startups. These stats are not included in this slide because here I was showing just the performance of the public guarantee on bank loans. I think it was quite exhaustive, wasn't it? Okay. Let me show you this. Well, it's a good question, because you help me say one thing that I forgot to highlight in my previous presentation. As you might have noticed, what we built and what I told you so far was more about creating the right enabling conditions, the rules of the game that can help startups, you know. Anything I mentioned concerns direct funding to startups, because we thought that this was a traditional, used to be a traditional way to interpret the relationship between the state, the government, and companies. So direct funding. Here in Italy, direct funding has a very controversial history, and so we thought that something else needed to be done because, you know, bribes, corruption, not very bright things are always behind the corner. And so we thought that first of all it was the case to build the right enabling conditions for the creation and then development of startups. Okay, beyond this, we have done recently something else. We had added a spin-off, let's say, to the main startup program. It's called Smart and Start program. It provides, it contains 250 million that might be given to only to high-tech startups as I previously defined them. So we are still talking always about innovative startups that are matching the definition I previously provided. 4 investment programs that range between 100,000 and 1.5 million euro. So if you have a business plan implying an investment of between 100,000 euro and 1.5 million euro, you can apply for this program and you're going to get a loan that covers up to 80% of the investment sum, and this loan is given without interest rate. Okay, so it's a zero interest rate funding program. It was launched in last February, and it's performing very well. We had many applications, and so many startups are. So it's comparatively with bank loans, it's even better because you don't have an interest rate. There's a nice thing in this program. The last bullet point, I like it very much, that in case you provide evidence that 30% of your investment program sorry, is funded through capital brought in by third parties like venture capitalists or business angels. While evaluating your application, the agency that is in charge of it, it's called Invitalia, is gonna give you a better note, and it's more likely that you're gonna get funding. Why this? Because it shows that you were able to convince some third parties of the availability of the quality of your investment program. So this means that the state can be a little bit strict in evaluating your investment program and somehow award you for having been able to convince some other people coming from the market that your business plan is viable. Okay? Yes. Of business, of sector. You know what? The problem, this is one of my worst enemies. It's called codici Ateco. You're Italian, aren't you? No. Yeah. You know what they are? They are some kind of codes that were created by the chambers of commerce to try to classify different sectors of business. The problem is that they are rigid. They are not flexible. So the last time they were renewed, they were updated, it was 2007, but in 2007 you didn't have, for example, Internet of Things or wearable devices. So now these kind of startups are classified as producers of softwares and some other stuff. So you cannot really go deeper and really analyze. So now what my current challenge last week at the ministry was to create a more flexible way to classify the activities of startups by letting them free to express, self-describe what they do through hashtags, like on Twitter. So who better than you knows what you do? Nobody. So soon they're gonna let be free to express the kind of activity they carry out. But okay, using the Ateco classification, I can tell you that most startups, like 80%, work in the services sector, and 20%, let's say 75% in the services sector, so software, ICT, this kind of stuff, and research, etc., and about 17% in manufacturing industry, craftsmanship, and just a few startups are classified as businesses dealing with tourism or agriculture. The problem is that many startups that, for example, deal with the tech food sector or with tourism are classified as services, as startups dealing with services. So having a bright classification of what startups are doing is very difficult nowadays, unfortunately. I can admit it with transparency. No, this is totally false. I don't know what you're referring to, honestly. Here in the startup law? Honestly, I don't know. I'm aware that startups do not know any kind of sectorial constraint. So the matter is they must have some clear linkage with either R&D or highly qualified personnel or patents. But then, once having provided evidence that they really possess at least one of these requirements, they can operate in any kind of sector. But just to give you a last line on your question, I can tell you that unfortunately, I can't give you a very precise answer, but believe me about something. Startups, this more than 4,000 startups operate in any kind of sector. So you have biotech, biomed, pharmaceutical, anything. It's really encompassing any kind of innovation dealing with any kind of sectorial of sector. Mm. Okay. It's definitely included, encompassed, embraced in the startup phenomenon. I know many innovative startups that deal with, how do you call it, cultural heritage management or stuff. By the way, let me tell you something. You remember I told you that tax incentives for investors range between 19 and 27%. Now we'll give you a deeper insight of this. So if you are a single individual, persona fisica, investing in an innovative startup, you're going to have a tax relief by 19%. If you are a company, so like for example a VC firm or a corporate investing in a startup, you're going to have a tax reduction by 20%. 19, 20%. But if the startup you're going to invest in is either dealing with clean technologies or it has a sort of social goal, and this might be the case of the startups you were referring to, these two percentages climb respectively to 25 and 27%. So this is providing an advantage to those investors that are brave enough to invest in startups with a social goal, as it might be the case of the business you have in your mind. So just know that we totally recognize this kind of sector, and not only we are recognizing it, we are attributing a value to it. Okay, but I really hope we can share email addresses and stuff. I can give you some examples of startups dealing with the cultural heritage, if you want. Other questions? There were some other raised hands. Yes. Anything. It can be physical products, it can be services, it can be anything. The important stuff is that it's about technological innovation. Or you're asking me about what are the most, what's your question? Like if they can do that, or what are the most spread? They can do either physical products or services. Yes. Yes. As I previously said, the startup phenomenon currently is affecting more than 20,000 people. So the last report dates back to the 31st of March, and at that time we had 15,000 people working in startups as shareholders and 3,000 people working as employees. So in total we had 18,000 people. Now, since in the first quarter of 2015 we had an increase by 3,000 people, I guess that by now we have more than at least more than 20,000 people. Okay? Okay. I would like to tell you about the Startup Visa program, which is something I'm really proud of, and in my opinion was a very creative way of bringing innovation within our legal framework. I'm gonna tell you a horror story now. You know how visas are provided to extra EU citizens that intend to come to Italy and set up a business? In the following way. First of all, they need to contact Chamber of Commerce, the Chamber of Commerce of the territory where they're gonna establish their business, and the Chamber of Commerce must certify that their business meets some unidentified national interest. So you must have a certification from your Chamber of Commerce that the business plan you're gonna draft meets some national interest, is of interest for our nation. Okay. Secondly, you must meet some financial requirements. The problem is that each Chamber of Commerce has different financial requirements. So for the same business, you might be asked to have to provide 50,000 euro in Venice and 40,000 euro in Milan. It's nonsensical. Thirdly, something else you need to obtain so as to have the visa is certification by the police station, certifying that you're not either a terrorist or a drug smuggler or stuff. The problem is that you can have this certification in two ways. Either you go physically to the police station, but this is nonsensical because if you are applying from Japan for a visa to Italy, it's impossible for you to go in person to the police station, so it's really stupid. Or you must ask and authorize somebody else at your place to go to the police station. But if you're a Japanese and don't know anybody in Italy, how can you contact and ask somebody to do that? That's the reason why nobody's coming to this country to set up new companies. So what we did was to centralize, simplify, rationalize, and put online this process. How? Through the Italian Startup Visa program. So for those who come from extra-EU countries and intend to come here and set up a high-tech startup, the following applies. First, they're sitting on their chair in Canada and they are thinking about coming to Italy to set up a company. They're going to draft their business plan. And by sitting on that chair, they submit it online to an email address that can be found on that internet website. What happens then? That a committee made up of people representing the startup ecosystem, so you have investors, you have CEOs of incubators, etc., that was gathered that was appointed by the Ministry of Economic Development, is going to evaluate the viability of your business plan. So it's not obscure bureaucrats, as I am, that decide if your business plan is viable or not. It's people that deal with startups every day that decide on the viability of your business plan. Secondly, the same fee is asked, the same financial availability is asked to everybody, 50,000 euro. So it doesn't vary depending on the kind of business you intend to develop. And third thing, the overall length of the procedure takes less than 30 days. So in less than 30 days, you're going to have a certification stating that your business proposal is viable or not. And in case it is viable, we're going to check at the police station if you are a terrorist or not. So you don't need to do that on your own in that nonsensical way I previously described. So this is very rational, very simple, very smart, because it happens online. Once obtained this certificate of non-impediment for a startup visa, but just at that very moment, you stand up from your chair, go to the competent embassy or consulate, and apply for a visa and get a visa. Okay? So this is very rational, very smart, and I'm very proud of that. Moreover, recently we launched another twin policy that is called Italia Startup, sorry for this pronunciation, but this is how we pronounce startup in Italian, Italia Startup Hub. It applies not to those who are in their home country and intend to come to Italy to set up a new company, but to those that are already in Italy with a regular residence permit, for example, for study reasons, talking about you guys, and intend to prolong their stay in Italy after the end of their PhD or whatever it is, to set up a new company. So they can use the same smart procedure to convert their residence permit for study reasons into a startup residence permit. Okay? In less than 30 days, I think much less than 30 days, you're going to have your residence permit converted if you convince us, not me, but the committee, that your business plan is viable and makes sense. This is called Italia Startup Hub. Figures so far about the Italia Startup Visa and Hub program. The visa program was launched very recently, like 1 year ago, on the 24th of June 2014. The Hub program was launched in December 2014. And I feel like crying here while saying this. It's not really providing, not encouraging, but let's say groundbreaking results. Why? Mainly because we have huge problems in communicating it to the students. We are quite good, at least in my humble opinion, at creating policies. We are desperately bloody bad at communicating them, and we are not really able to reach talents that are here and need to be retained in our country. That's the reason why I'm here today, by the way. And so we have had around 30 3 applications. Consider that other countries that have a better reputation than Italy, such as, for example, the Netherlands, didn't have, and created similar programs, don't have much better figures. So, for example, in the Netherlands, where a similar program was launched last year, they have like 30 applications. So it's not just about us. However, 33 applications, in my opinion, is a very disappointing result, and I'm really desperate, and I really feel like disseminating it and advertise it in a more efficient way. However, most of the applicants come from Russia and Ukraine. We have had some other applications from the United States, Brazil, South Korea, Japan, but really many applicants from are from Russia and Ukraine. Okay, just a couple of things. First of all, I told you about 3 hours ago that all the measures that are applicable to startups have recently been made applicable also to a broader audience of companies. We call them innovative SMEs. What are they? Basically, they are companies, always LTD companies, meeting some requirements dealing with technological innovation, more or less the same requirements needed for startups, but they are not subject to the same age and dimensional limits. So we are talking about companies that are older than 5 years and have a turnover that exceeds 5 million euros. Still, they need to be SMEs, so with less than 50 million of turnover and with less than 250 employees, but it's, as is obvious, a broader arena of companies. This was launched by just a couple of months ago, and the new portal for this kind of company is going to be launched on Monday. So basically the same advantages applicable to startups are attributable also to this kind of companies, such as equity crowdfunding, incentives on investment, a simplified access to the public guarantee fund. All this stuff is applicable also to these companies. I won't go back on that. Just to conclude, a couple of further things, or further measures that still deal with technological innovation. Measure number 1 is R&D tax credit that was set up last December with the new budget law. It implies a tax credit by 25% on costs related to R&D activities. Not all costs, but you must need some to fulfill some requirements. First of all, these costs must be by at least 30,000 euros. And secondly, the tax relief applies to the incremental part. So that is to the delta, including the incremental part of the R&D expenditures compared to the average amount of expenditures that you had in the last 3 years. But it's written better there than the way I explained it. The percentage of fiscal advantage climbs to 50% in case the costs are related to either the work of highly qualified people like you, or in case of outsourcing of the R&D activity to third companies such as innovative startups. So the scheme is, we thought that mature companies like the typical traditional SME that is dealing with the typical sectors of the made in Italy and aspires to make R&D but does not have the talents, the machineries, etc. to do it internally, this kind of company can externalize the process, outsources by using innovative SMEs or research centers or university laboratories, and if this occurs, the fiscal advantages climbs by 50%. This is meant to help open innovation processes. Yeah. 5 billion per year, 5 million per year for each company. No. The second measure is called patent box. I will go very rapidly on this. It's fiscal advantage for the income coming from the use of patents or some other tools aimed at protecting the intellectual property, and it's very interesting too. That's it. Here you can find some links. That's the internet website of the Ministry of Economic Development. There's a part, the only nice part of the site that is translated in English is, of course, the one devoted to innovative startups. You have that internet web, that email address, sorry. In case you wanted my email address, it's my name.surname. So it's mattia.corbetta@misc.gov.it. And that's it. Any other questions? Sure. No. I didn't say that you go to the bank and automatically you're gonna have. It's still business, so you still need to convince the bank that your business model is feasible, it's viable, and it's worth investing in it. So it's still a deal that takes place under logics of market. So we are not in El Dorado or whatever, but the access is automatic. So if the bank gets the risk for at least for 20% of the sum that is lent to the company, then the public fund will be activated automatically. Nobody, I said that it's without further due diligence. This is what I meant. No other checks are needed, so it's working really fast. You don't need to wait for some obscure bureaucrats evaluating your business. It's going to work automatically. There's not going to be any kind of evaluation. And in addition to this, the guarantee is given for free, without costs. This is what distinguishes this measure from the way it's applicable to standard companies. Because usually there's another due diligence step that is made by the public guarantee fund, and the guarantee is not given for free. Okay, for innovative startups and innovative SMEs, it's going to work for free and without further due diligence. And 172 million were lent to more than 380 startups, so it's working a lot. No, it must be an established company. But guys, I know it's very boring, and sorry for this and for killing your brains, but let me specify a concept. I'm afraid I didn't really explain very well. Who decides if you are an innovative startup or not? You. It's not other people deciding that you meet those requirements. You are a guy that establishes a new LTD, okay? And at that very point, if you know the law, and if you think that your company meets the requirements, you download a form on the internet website I previously mentioned. It's called startup.registroimprese.it. Okay, you download this form. You just You just sign it electronically. Certifying that you meet those requirements, so there won't be any kind of check from the government. Ex post, there might be some controls, some checks, and in case you lied, you're gonna give the money back in case you benefited from some advantages, etc. But this is meant to be very flexible and very quick, so as not to prevent companies from benefiting from the program just because of the typical slowness of the state bureaucracy. I don't mean that it's control-free. There are actual controls ex post, just they are not made ex ante. Yes.
sometimes there are some, I just know some example in Torino. Maybe a couple of things that are interesting, and also could be something to add on the top of this, on the top of the Italian regulations. How to put together, in general, also, sometimes you can have a selection at the university level. Let's say we want to grant maybe 10, let's say, help 10 new startups. Maybe there is an initial grant. It can be something decided if the university has the budget to do that. Thanks maybe to budget that can come also from banks. So they could have maybe collaboration in that, and then they decide to, it was done, for instance, in Polytechnic Torino, they have an agreement with banks, and they select.
Wait. Second, don't go away, Alberto. Before, no. Wait, this is very important. That guy's name is Alberto Di Minin. He is, actually, when you asked me about funding forms and funding schemes for Italian startups, I forgot to mention that being Italian startups, European companies, they can benefit from Horizon 2020 funding schemes. And as you might know, there are two programs. One is called SME Initiative. No,
The cost action.
sorry, come si chiama? SME Initiative, yes, and he is the national focal point for that measure. So, Alberto, would you like to, can I share your email address with the guys? Do you, okay. Just a last question. The two programs you're following are called SME Instrument and Access to Risk Finance. Now I remember them. Okay.
I will thank again Yeah. Yeah, but
startups or startup weekends. They are really flourishing throughout the national territory. You just need to go to an internet website that is called italiastartup.it/who's who. Okay, italiastartup.it/who's who. There you can find all startup weekends, startups, and all other initiatives aimed at funding new companies and new business plans. There are really many. I could give you plenty of examples.
Claudia? Claudia?
Yes. Mm. Okay. 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 So conceptually, you need to distinguish between donation, reward-based, and equity-based crowdfunding. What I was talking about, what I was referring about, is just equity crowdfunding. So in exchange for the money you give, you're going to have some shares of the company. Donation crowdfunding is just about donations, so you don't have anything back. Reward crowdfunding might be a gadget or some free tickets or some fit and try programs, etc. Kickstarter and some other platforms are not in the equity crowdfunding spectrum. And referring specifically to equity crowdfunding in Italy, we have 15 portals, so we have many. They are Italian. The problem is that just half of them are active. So just half of them have managed so far to find startups that were eager to launch an equity crowdfunding campaign. And so like about 25 operations campaign were launched so far, but just 7 of them were successful, like 9 of them were unsuccessful, and 5 are still ongoing. I think the solution is time. Like we need to wait that our investment environment becomes more inclined to investing in high-risk companies. This is the problem. It's not about. It's also about regulations, because regulations for equity crowdfunding are, honestly speaking, are still quite strict. Because the equivalent of the American SEC, designed very, very, very rigid regulations. But beyond this, we really have a cultural gap that needs to be bridged. So I think the solution is to, yes, reshape and improve a little bit the regulatory framework that was the first in the world, but have some bad sides. But apart from this, we need to raise awareness among investors and educate them to this kind of investment. That's the main issue. Yes, companies can raise money through foreign crowdfunding portals, be they donation, reward, or equity-based. So I'm not aware of any kind of obstacle for an Italian startup to raise money through Kickstarter or... Are you sure? No, but I think things change. I've heard of that, but I think it changed. I mean, I know some companies that raise money through Kickstarter. Well, a unique portal could be possible in the in the former Soviet Union, maybe. Nothing against it, by the way, but I mean that's another kind of system. I mean, a unique portal would imply regulatory framework. That's what we're working on, and I mentioned that some other countries have recently set up some regulations on equity crowdfunding that are quite similar to the Italian one, and allow investors to operate in different countries. So there's an interoperability of the operations. So France, Germany, England, and Great Britain, sorry, and Spain recently passed some regulations on equity crowdfunding, and the European Union is aware of this need, and I think they're going to work on that soon. You know what? The problem is that it's a matter of reputation. Italy does not manage to attract foreign capital for its startups, not because we lack of startups, not because we lack of talent, not because we lack of good rules, because now we have them, as I showed. The problem is that we're still subject to the bad reputation we're very good at creating in the last few decades. And so you can really imagine how hard it is to go abroad and convince like my interlocutors that we have taken such giant steps in the last 3 years. But I think we have a competitive advantage because we had the chance to see what the others have been doing in the last few years, and we're basically copying and pasting most of the programs. Like the Italia Startup Visa programs is very similar to the Startup Chile one, for example. So we can really go quickly now and improve our reputation. But I think this is the main obstacle that is preventing our startup ecosystem from attracting more capital than how it is doing now. Ok.
No, please thank again Michael Corbetta, Eugenio Terlesi.